Okay. Okay.
Perfect. Okay, so here's where we're getting started on our agenda. We will review our objectives and take a few minutes just to look over the DART curriculum as kind of a very top-down view and overview. Then we'll go deeper into the curriculum through the 5 E's framework. They use for their framework engagement, which is kind of their warm-up, exploration, explanation, elaboration, and evaluation. And every time I read those, I have to look at them and read them because I'm so afraid I'll mix up a couple of the steps. Then we'll talk about some tips and techniques that you can use at the tutoring level, small group level, class or program level, and also some strategies for implementation. So find your reactions and give us a thumbs up if you've ever taught digital literacy skills, or a thumbs up if you've ever taught beginning multilingual learners or emergent readers and writers. Excellent, excellent. Thanks, Michaela. Thanks, Katie. You can also just give me a real person thumbs up as well. Thanks, Catherine. Great. So one of the special things about this curriculum is that it's designed to be useful and accessible and effective for beginning multilingual learners. There are a lot of curriculums out there that say they're for beginners. And then when you look through the first few pages, you quickly realize that the beginners they're talking about are different than the beginners that you're talking about. So this really is designed to be an entry-level curriculum, which is wonderful for our learners. So the original DART curriculum is a proprietary curriculum owned by Tyson's Foods, but we're hoping that today, after coming to this webinar, you'll be able to understand its original purpose and notice how they use the 5E lesson plan to convey their objectives, language learning opportunities and practice, and to structure their lessons. And then you will be able to consider adoption of activities, lessons, or the entire curriculum as a way to support the learners that you work with. So why and where was this created? If you think about the challenges that are facing an employee who's told to use a website, a desktop, a laptop, something like that for their sign-in and login, to clock their hours, to look at their schedule, communicate with their boss, check on their pay statement, or ask questions about their benefits, they may have to navigate through several different pages with a lot of text. They may have to use things like drop-down menus, radio buttons, multiple choice features, and they may see things like they can't get through because they don't know how to click submit, or they're not familiar with that word. So we're going to give you a brief overview here of some of the things that Tyson's was looking for, and then also how that transitioned into being an open educational resource. So in their factories nationwide, they have more than 120,000 employees, and thousands of these employees speak another language as their first language. Many of them are immigrants, and they just really struggled to do the processes that they needed to do to start and finish their day, and all of the other HR tasks that they needed to take care of. One factory or plant may have workers from about 50 different countries. So it wasn't as easy as just saying, oh, well, we will translate this into X language. They just kept coming across struggles as they tried to support their employees. So they reached out to Glenda Rose. I don't know if any of you have been to Big TESOL and seen her presentations, but if you ever get an opportunity, she is a very wise educator. And she's not only wise as far as book learning, but she's very practical and she has a great sense of humor. So it's wonderful to go to her presentation if you ever get the opportunity. But she created it along with Denise Guckert. And this was created, as I said before, as a proprietary curriculum. It was owned by Tyson's. And Tyson's was looking for basically 8 major milestones and 34 competencies. So they created a curriculum that would have English language learning opportunities, as well as the digital literacy skills tied together in one place. They allowed Glenda and Denise to retain the permissions so that this could be shared as an open educational resource. You can see here this little picture that says CC by NCSA. And this means that this has a Creative Commons license. So this means you are allowed to adapt, use, edit, and share the material, but you do have to give credit to the authors. So you have to give credit to Glenda and Denise for their work. You can't sell any part of the curriculum because they've already created it. And when you share it, whatever you share will also have this same license. So for example, if you decided to use a handout or one of their videos in something that you were sharing, that resource would now be covered under this Creative Commons license. So although this was meant to meet the needs of Tyson's and their factories, this can be used by a wide variety of programs across levels. If the questions are too hard, make them easier. If the lesson plan is too long, consider doing it in 2 or 3 or 4 lessons. Do you need to give special instructions or differentiation? You can do whatever you need to do to make this work for you. One of the things that I'll mention is that they were using Surface devices in their classrooms, but other classrooms could be using many different devices, from tablets to smartphones to laptops. They also designed this to be an in-person curriculum, but I've used pieces of this curriculum virtually and it worked very well. So I think it could be used by an in-person program or for online learning. So here's our first check-in. I just want to take a couple of minutes to ask you, what kinds of daily digital resilience tasks do your learners need to accomplish? So you can either type your answer in the chat, or you can unmute and tell us. We don't have a big group, so it would be totally fine to do that. The things I'm thinking of are things like, do they wake up in the morning and check the weather on their phones before they head out to work or their kids head out to school? Michaela said learners check in every day using a QR code. Absolutely, yeah. Checking work schedules, right? Using an app. So being able to open and use an app on your phone. Bus schedules, yeah. Thanks. I think some other things that our learners are using are Google Maps or Apple Maps, some kind of mapping. Online job applications, yeah. Also texting their boss or their coworkers with questions. Many of the learners in my classes have used Amazon for purchases. They might talk to their child's teacher. Checking text messages and different apps. Thanks, CK. Google Translate, yes. And picking up their homework assignments, right? Sometimes we send things through Google Classroom, WhatsApp, Remind, Telegram. And I think many of my learners are also using social media, whether it's Facebook or Instagram, whatever they're interested in using. Maybe they're using YouTube to practice English. Great. So in adult ESL, we've been using this first definition for a while to inform our teaching practice. It's a really good definition talking about helping our learners to develop these skills to use technology and develop digital citizenship. So, but this is where it's not quite enough, that we need just a little bit more. And we have this other definition for digital resilience or digital resiliency, where we have the awareness, skills, agility, and confidence to be empowered users of new technologies, new platforms, apps, software. And here's an example. If I teach my students how to use Gmail, so we create an account, and I teach them how to send a simplified email using a template. They may go to work and find out, oh, well, we don't have Gmail at work. We're given an email and we have to use a different system. Maybe we're on Outlook, or maybe we are using Canvas. Maybe we have just something proprietary. So if our students only know how to follow these 10 steps to do the thing they need, and all of a sudden they come to another platform, now they're stuck. They look at their piece of paper, they look at step number 2, and they see nothing that looks like step number 2. So what we're instead trying to do is build that confidence and develop those skills so that they're able to find things in different platforms that can help them do what they need to do. For example, they might need to know that that little cog in the gray box is a settings wheel. And so in settings, what can you do? Well, maybe you can change your display, or you can check your Wi-Fi signal. You can log into Wi-Fi at school or work. And so just by making that little switch of teaching them how to use something that's common across platforms, we're helping them to become more independent learners and not just learn the pieces that we're giving to them, but helping them to develop digital resiliency on their own. So DRAW, which is part of World Education, has a great definition that pulls this together. They say digital resilience improves the capacity to problem solve and upskill, to navigate digital transformations and be active participants in society and the economy. This means maybe you spend a little extra time and you teach them how to use the search bar effectively. So they aren't typing in an entire sentence, but they're hitting the keywords that will help them find the answers they need. So let's move on, looking at digital resiliency in the framework. We have 20 lessons here that will guide them through the beginning skills of digital resiliency. And they're organized through this 5E framework. Each lesson has an overview, objectives, a complete plan, and is correlated to standards. So you don't need an account to use this. You don't need to sign in. Everything is there for you, from all of the supplies that are needed, the instructional resources, the tech, the handouts, online activities like word wall. Everything is packaged together for you. Oh, Catherine, I just saw your chat that some of your students are using Duolingo. That's fantastic. So the curriculum is correlated to these 4 sets of standards. Many of us are used to using the English language proficiency standards in our ESL classes. But this curriculum is also correlated so that it meets the CASA's content standards, the Seattle Digital Equity Initiative Digital Skills Framework, and North Star Digital Literacy Standards. And the way that works is when you look at a lesson, it will break out in each one of those categories what your objectives are according to those standards. This is really great because sometimes you see the explanation in one set of standards for the objective, and you're not quite sure how that fits for your class or what you might need to adapt. But just by looking at the other sets of standards for correlations, it really increases the flexibility of the curriculum as you see, oh, well, this particular objective might not be what my students need, but if I look over in the CASA's content standards, or I look in the Seattle digital equity standards, that helps me to understand how to better use this lesson to support my class. So thinking about an overview of the whole entire curriculum from DART, you have 20 lessons. These are the 20 lessons, and they start off with learning the alphabet, lowercase and uppercase, learning numbers and special keys on the keyboard, symbols, and then you're going to start talking about things like strong and weak passwords, using the internet and Windows, creating a Gmail account and being able to send a simple email. So the whole thing with using an open educational resource is you can use this to fill in gaps in your own curriculum. You can use just one lesson that you think your class might need, or even one activity in a lesson. Or you can say, hey, our program doesn't have money to buy some new fancy curriculum. You might use all 20 lessons in your program. So I think it's a really great resource, and especially that it's open makes it even better. So let's take a look at it. In this first E, which is kind of like their warm-up or introduction, we are activating prior vocabulary and connecting to relevancy. We know that when we're teaching adults and with andragogy, it's very important that our learners understand why they are learning to do something. Also, as kind of a bonus, this gives you a little bit of a needs assessment. So you start to see where they are and what support they're going to need along the way in order to reach success in the objective. You might get the lesson started just by looking at something like this picture and asking them what they see, what words they know. Tell your partner what you see in the picture. Ask your classmate to your right what you see in the picture. And in this case, we're looking at passwords on our phones. We're talking about passwords. So these passwords are called pins. And so you might take some time out to talk about what a pin is and the pronunciation of the words within that acronym. And they really make this very clear for the instructor. So even if you're someone who says, oh, I've never really taught digital literacy before, I'm not really sure how to do that, they make this very easy for anyone to get started. They tell you what to say, what to ask, what to write on the board. And then they draw everything in. So it's not just a teacher-led lesson, but most of the time the students are working in partner groups or in small groups while the instructor is monitoring before coming back together for a whole class feedback. So here's our second check-in point. If I need to teach my class something about using passwords, creating a password and logging into a device, what letters, symbols, and keyboard keys do they need to know to be successful in that objective? What do you think? You can write it in the chat, or you can just say it out loud.
They would need to know the letters in their username and password, and they would need to know the special character @ for most email sign-ins. Some email sign-ins, you don't have to put the @ kind of depending on how it's set up, but generally you need to know where and what the @ symbol is. Also the period And then being able to shift between capital and lowercase letters because most passwords are case sensitive. And then also,
Yes.
I know something my students really struggle with is they'll do all caps for their username. And like, so recognizing, oh, the little light on your keyboard, that means that your caps lock is on. Also recognizing that sometimes there's a little eyeball symbol, either inside the username or password box or right outside, and knowing that that symbol means, oh, if you click on that, you can see it. Sometimes you can click on it and it will stay on showing you, or sometimes you have to keep pressing with your mouse on that little eyeball in order to see what it says. If you just click on it, it's gonna like flash at you and then you still don't know what it says. And then also knowing, some of my upper level students know that you can sort of like a cheat code is using the tab to like skip between boxes.
Yes.
And I have to be really careful who I explain that to because that is a dangerous piece of information. Some students just are not ready for that and it causes more trouble than it's worth.
So I'm really curious, what do you call the little eyeball? Do you just say the eyeball?
I just call it a little eyeball. I draw it on a whiteboard, and then I was like, and then I asked them like, what part of the body does this look like? And we sometimes have a laugh because I'm not the best artist in the whole world, and it
Yeah.
takes them a minute to guess. And sometimes I put little glasses on the eyeball, be like, help you remember this is an eyeball, that sort of thing.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing. Yeah. And so you mentioned like all of these big, really important keys. We've got not just 26 letters in the alphabet, because we've got lowercase and we have uppercase, and then we have 10 numbers, and then we have symbols. And you mentioned the shift key, and they're going to need enter and caps lock. So when they created this curriculum, they said, okay, let's start with a very minimum. They don't need to know how to use every button on the keyboard, but they do need to know these key pieces. And they were shocked when they added it up. And, it was actually a lot. It wasn't just 26 because, adding in uppercase and adding in the symbols, and shift and tab. Wow, tab is a whole new world when you start using that. So if you're teaching a class and they need to learn all of this, how many of those do you tackle in one lesson? What do you think?
I would say for me, I would start with the letters in their username and password. They don't have to know every single letter on the keyboard. They just have to know what letters are in their username and password, and maybe their PIN, or if they have multi-factor authentication for logging into whatever they're trying to log into. Um, so I would start with those three pieces of information. So I'd have the students write on their whiteboard or their notebook or whatever, and then show them where those keys are on the keyboard. And then probably I just have them, all right, now you're going to type that out 20 times on this Google Doc while I go help the next person.
Yes. So you can monitor and make your way around. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
great. Yeah, they suggested in their outline probably no more than 5 or 6 in one lesson. So if you're trying to make your way through the alphabet, lowercase and uppercase, with a class of very beginners, that means that you're not going to get it all in probably the first week. You're probably going to have to take some time from every lesson for a couple of weeks or longer, trying to really solidify those skills. Okay, so moving into exploration. This is something that's going to get them speaking English. So it's not just a teacher-led thing, but they're working in partner groups or small groups speaking English. This could be a guided exploration, or it could be something hands-on, like you're using manipulatives. And I know this is really small on your screen, but we're going to give you the link to the curriculum so you have the whole thing and can download it. But here, where they're starting from in their lesson is trying to decide if this is a strong password or a weak password. So if you've worked with Bloom's taxonomy before or Webb's depth of knowledge, as we make our way through the 5 E's, we're moving up the higher critical thinking skill kind of steps. And so we've already had our little bit of a warm up where we're just going to identify some things. Now we're moving into asking students to sort and order. Is this a weak password or a strong password? And why? What's the difference? Why is this one better than this one? So then you're going to write something on the board and ask why it is strong and see if they can identify those keywords we've learned about uppercase and lowercase and symbol. And then you're going to talk about how sometimes it's really hard if someone tells you a website address or a username or password, and it's difficult to understand what they said. Maybe you know the symbol for $, but percentage is something new and challenging for you. And the other piece they're also learning is that just because we have all of these symbols doesn't mean that a particular company or organization will allow you to use all of those symbols when you create your password. So a lot of learning happening here. And so as we get into this curriculum a little bit further, we're going to go out to a 10-minute breakout room. Well, I'm actually going to cheat on that. We're going to do an 8-minute breakout room and come back for a 2-minute whole class feedback. Katie, if I could ask you to put those links into the chat one at a time. And before we go out to our breakout room, if you could please click on these links so that nothing disappears when you go to the breakout room. Go ahead to the chat, click on the links so they're open, and then we'll give you a minute or so to do that. And then Katie will send us out for 8 minutes. And if someone wants to be really brave and just say like, hey, we got it, we can see it, that would be awesome.
You're wanting to know if we can see the links?
Yeah, can you click on them? They're working okay for you?
Yep, they're working. The links in the chat are working.
Okay, perfect. I think I got them all. Sorry.
No worries. Okay, Katie, let's give them just a minute, make sure everybody's been able to click on them.
Okay.
All right, I think we're good. You can go ahead and open those breakout rooms for 8 minutes, and then we'll see you back. And I'm going to ask you to report back on which one might be helpful to your learners and why. Somebody like to share something that they talked about in their room, in your breakout room, something that might be helpful in these resources and why it's helpful, why you think it might be helpful. You can also share in the chat if you don't want to unmute.
Sue Park and I were in a breakout room together and we were looking over the resources, and we both really enjoyed the bingo cards, because there's a lot of different ways that you can use that for letter recognition, for a listening practice, for a speaking practice. You have a student call out the letters. So we just both really appreciated how versatile that particular resource is.
Yeah, I agree. And it's nice that they gave you 15, because I feel like I often have more than 15, but sometimes I have people who really need to work together with a partner on that type of activity. So I probably don't have more than 30 in a classroom. So I thought it would be, it's just a nice number of sheets that they gave you. Anyone else? What was something that could be helpful to your learners? Okay, let's move on. So continuing in this same password lesson, this one is on explanation. So you're going to watch with your class a couple of short YouTube videos, and then you're going to discuss it. So you might want to play the videos more than once for your class. The first time they're just kind of catching the gist of it. You might do a prediction activity ahead of that, and then follow up with were they right, or what did they guess about this video. You might watch it again and try to pull out some of those keywords or vocabulary. You might watch it one more time and answer just a couple of questions. Or you could even, I was mentioning in our breakout room, sometimes when I watch videos with our emerging readers and writers or our lowest levels, sometimes I just turn the volume off on the video and let them just kind of watch it and see the pictures and start to kind of understand some of the information without it just being too overwhelming. So I'm just going to show you just a few seconds of what one of those looks like. I'm just going to leave it in this screen's this slide sorter for now. Let me make sure I have my sound shared. Okay, so we're just going to watch a couple seconds of this.
Strong and weak passwords. A weak password is easy to guess. A strong password is difficult to guess. This is a weak password. It is easy to guess. This is a strong password. It contains an uppercase letter, lowercase letters, numbers, and symbols. This is a weak password. It is easy to guess. This is a strong password. It contains uppercase letters, a lowercase letter, numbers, and a symbol.
So, and I think if I were using this video with a class of beginners, you know, we might take some time here to talk about what these all are, to identify them and make sure that they've got that before moving on. So you're going to watch the videos, and then you are going to start talking about clarifying questions. So this could be, can you repeat, can you repeat that? Or what did you say? All of these clarifying questions that they're going to need to know. So really helpful phrases. And I'm going to ask you in just a minute to do a short walkthrough of the lesson on your own. But let me show you what it looks like first, so you know where we're heading you off to. 1 second. Okay, so when you go out to the website, it's going to look like this. You'll see on the left all of the lessons, and on the right, you'll see a short explanation of each lesson, as well as the resources that you have. You can download them immediately, or you can also download an editable version. So maybe you need something that's adapted a little bit, and you can just go ahead and edit the lesson plan. It also tells you the resources that are contained. So we looked at the resources for lesson 1. But we've been talking about the password lesson, which is here, strong and weak passwords. Again, you can download the lesson or download one that's editable. You can look at two different handouts that I'm going to show you here. This one is on clarifying questions. So there's some questions here that you're going to ask them to work with a partner or a small group to work on. And this one I really like. It's a partner dictation. So they call it a role play, but you have two people. One person has the list of passwords and they're going to read them to their partner who's going to write them down. And then they're going to switch. And so now they have the opposite roles. The person who is writing is now speaking. The person who's speaking is now writing. And I think this is a really nice activity to also use as a formative assessment of kind of common errors among the class. Maybe everybody is having problems with the @ sign, or maybe people are using asterisk or something else and they're struggling to remember that word. So it's a nice place to come back with the whole group and talk about some of those common errors. Other pieces of this lesson that I think are really nice, there is a word wall that includes a quiz. You don't have to pay for word wall to use it. You can just start it and they're going to identify which one is the @ symbol. So which one do I want here? A, B, C, or D?
D.
I think I heard D. So we're going to go with that one. And I think this also provides differentiation because maybe you have some learners who are a little bit ahead. They might be ready to go straight to this activity while you are supporting some learners who need some additional practice or additional help on some of the symbols or numbers or something like that. So I'm going to ask Katie to share the link. Do you see it, Katie?
Yes, I placed the one there, and then I also put the website, both of them.
Perfect. Thank you. So we're going to head out for our breakout room. And you can make us in slightly. So our questions here, let me pull them up. So what kind of differentiation did you see within the lesson?
I think with the handout on the clarification questions, that was a way to provide some of the scaffolding for someone who may not be at a higher language level, so that they don't have to think of it on their own. They know you have kind of like when you have a word wall, kind of. It's there, easy for you to access and bring that language in so you can keep practicing and making it more natural.
Great, thank you, Sue. What would be necessary for your learners in this lesson?
Hi, Darlene.
Yeah, go ahead.
We were thinking about 100s, 150s, and we thought that, I mean, there's so much in here as one lesson. It's too much, it's too overwhelming, but that we could introduce an item and then maybe 10 or 15 minutes a day, have review. Maybe it's the trickle in activity, but we were thinking about if there were sentence strips on the board, explaining why something is a good password or a weak password. Like, they don't have to recall it themselves. They can point to it and say, this is a good password because it has different characters, or it's not a good password because it doesn't have enough characters. It's too short, some simple sentences. And then eventually they're going to use those without having to refer to the sentence strips. But
that's fantastic. I love that you're providing the additional support with sentence strips.
Yeah. Jennifer came up with the most amazing TPR exercise She thought about asking students to create good passwords by lining up in order. She also thought about the teacher calling out a password, capital A, lowercase z like zebra, and have the student with that card get in line to create the password right there on the spot. So we were thinking about activities that would daily reinforce what they've learned and just have them see and use the language again and again in different ways, in different activities.
That's fantastic. Jennifer, I love the idea, or I love Jennifer's idea of incorporating movement into the class also, so that we're staying away from the teacher-led, we're just keeping on with partner groups, small groups, and then whole class activities with incorporation of movement, I think is powerful. So is there anything that would make you take a guess on how long the lesson would take? This isn't a gotcha question. I'm just curious how long you think this would take a typical class that you're thinking about.
My class periods are typically about 2 hours long with my students, and I see them twice a week. I don't think my students are ready for this immediately, but I think once a few more skills are in place, this would probably take about a 2-hour session. I would probably pre-teach some key vocabulary and have them take that home and think about it over the weekend. And then when we met the following week, kind of like jump into the lesson. And then we meet on Monday and Wednesdays. So Wednesday is my cleanup day. Whatever we didn't get to on Monday. It's like, all right, before you have a whole weekend to go watch TikTok, let's finish up what we were working on Monday.
Yeah. And I think that dovetails in with what Angie was saying perfectly too, about how you can use just a little piece of this, like maybe one password they're putting in order as either a trickle activity or a transition activity. You can just kind of work it into a typical lesson at different points. So thanks, everyone. Okay, now we're moving to elaboration. So this is when you're taking something you've learned and applying it in a new way. So here they're starting off with a review, and then as you write some things on the board, you're eliciting the names of what you're writing, whether it's a question mark or whatever it is. And you tell them they're going to need to know these specific words for the activity, and you pass out the partner dictation or the role play. You model it first. I think that's a great thing about this curriculum. Everything is I do, we do, you do. You're not just sending them off to a website or saying, oh, here's a link, you've got it. You're really providing support every step along the way. One other piece of this I wanted to mention is that not only can you go to that front landing page for the curriculum, but they've also repackaged the curriculum in a couple of different ways depending on how you want to use it. So you can download those specific lessons. You can also just go straight to a PDF that's almost 300 pages. I think it's 288 pages. So if you wanted to have a course book for your office or for different people to kind of page through and look at, you could do that as well. And it also provides you some of the backstory of how the curriculum was created. And then there's a shorter version of that that's about 50 pages. And you might use that if you just want the lessons at a glance. So I'm working with some experienced teachers. This is not going to be a huge shift for them. They just really need a snapshot of a lesson. They don't need then the instructor walks to the front of the room, then the instructor turns around. They understand how to make their way through a lesson plan. And so it's just kind of a snapshot that has the links. And that's really a nice support, I think, as well. That might be all a more experienced instructor would need. So just curious, we are running a little short on time. So I'm not going to send us out to this Mentimeter, but if you wouldn't mind just chiming in with how do you think you would use this kind of lesson in your curriculum? Do you think you would take the whole lesson, or do you think you would just kind of pick and choose different activities that might support something you're already doing? So just curious how you think you would use this.
Darlene, from my perspective, I'm sorry, it was such a long lesson, and we didn't read through every part of it while we were in a breakout room. So I'm guessing that I would probably either break it into pieces for a level 100, an absolute beginner, particularly if I had literacy students in there. I can see if I were teaching a higher level, I could tackle it in a maybe 2 parts.
Yeah.
You know, on a day where I had the computer cart, maybe, and the students were going to do computer lab, maybe break it into 2 parts in that way.
Yeah, I think that's great. And when they started using this curriculum with classes, they quickly found out that depending on the proficiency level, if you were working with beginners or your NRS level 1, this could take 50 hours or more to complete this curriculum, because they are having to learn the numbers and the letters and the symbols all for the first time. But if you have maybe some intermediate or advanced learners, these are people who they know the alphabet, but they're probably learning the English words for some of the digital literacy language for the first time. They were able to make it through the lessons in about 20-25 hours, depending on the group. So I think it's just one of those planning points to think about. Your pacing is going to be dramatically different depending on the people you have in your class on that day.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Did they take into account anybody's proficiency with technology when they were estimating time?
Yeah, they did. They talked about that, how essentially these employees that were being steered into these groups had essentially 0 hours with a device. Many of them had smartphones, but not something that they were able to interact with or engage with at more than a minimal level. Yeah. That's a great point, Sue. Okay, so we come to the final E here. Whoops. Go back up one. And this is where you're going to assess. These assessments are going to help you to know what can your class do right now and what do they need additional practice on. And one of the things they found was that after learning the alphabet, they included some type of keyboarding practice in every single lesson, because it's not enough for them to just learn it once. They really need to keep practicing, because have you really learned it if it still takes you 20 minutes to type in your username and password, right? So they are continuing to build on that confidence and develop those skills all the way through. So here you see in this evaluation, they choose a dictation. I would probably do this as a small group and have one person be reading this, or you could do this in partners where you are still doing the dictation and they are doing a partner check and then a whole class feedback, but you could break it out any way that you want. Then you're reviewing at the end, and you can write the words, the passwords on the board. You can give them a word bank if they need additional support. So you could provide this assessment in a variety of ways depending on the level of learners in your class. And I'm curious about your favorite assessment strategies. So Katie, could you drop the Jamboard link into the chat? Just pull this down here. If you can make your way to the Jamboard, I'm just going to ask you, what are some different ways that you assess learners at the end of an activity? maybe the end of a class, or maybe the end of a unit. So write one on a sticky note, and I said you get extra points, bonus points, if it's a low prep way to assess your class. That's great. Student self-assessment. Exit tickets. Excellent. I like using the happy, neutral, and sad face sometimes too, and they can just put a sticky note where they are. I prepare close, match, or unscramble activities. So from easiest to hard, do you think it would be match would be easier, and then close, and then unscramble? I'm curious. Exit tickets. Nice.
For my close, I would start a close with maybe 2 options. For each activity, the close has 2 options, and it's going to be, you know, I use my keyboard or banana to type my name. You know, I make it super, super, super obvious so that they've got that. And then that's activity 1, and then they can refer back.
That's great. I also like with close activities, it's nice when you have, you know, the activity here, and then at the bottom you have a word bank, and you can kind of fold it up, but you tell people if they need additional support, they can unfold it, or they could check their spelling by unfolding it. Oh, present their work to the class. Nice. Student self-assessment and exit tickets. Wow, I think exit tickets are super popular. And I think it's a really good way to have people reflect on their own learning. Excellent. Thanks, everyone. Okay. Let me reshape my box. So here's some tips and techniques for using the curriculum. I know some of you may be working with tutors who are one-on-one with students. Others may be in typical classrooms. Some of you might have small groups. But I think it's really important to start with a social emotional learning check-in at the beginning of each lesson. It's a great way to find out who's feeling a little bit anxious or worried about what the lesson is going to be, or what they might have to do, as well as who just came off shift and is totally exhausted, who has a baby that was up half the night with a toothache. You know, it's just really nice way to figure out where everyone is as you're getting started. And then mirroring that with a reflection at the end of class, like we talked about these exit tickets, where you're helping learners to develop that self-awareness about their own abilities and what they need to practice. Also, they've given you all of the tech here, right? They have given you the YouTube videos, the word wall, all of these online resources. Still practice them first. Make sure you are able to use them first. You know, sometimes glitches still happen, and so it's really important to practice it first before you just bring the class into it. Choose what's best for your class. So if you have a 90-minute class and there are 7 activities, there's probably no way you're going to make it through them all. Choose what's going to be the best for your learners, and use those extra resources for some kind of out-of-class extension. Maybe you can send them via text or WhatsApp, Remind, or Telegram. Maybe you can share them in a Gmail. But because they have given you these resources, it's great to be able to use them for additional support and practice. Make sure as you're planning, you're considering the kind of devices your class owns. So a lot of these beginning lessons were done without laptops in the room. So students were using, excuse me, pencil and paper, they're using their phones. And so think about how that's going to change what you're asking them to do. And how can you reach learners on more than one device? So maybe one day in class, you're practicing some kind of typing on a keyboard, like on a laptop. But the next day in class, maybe you're asking them to type on their phone and send you a phone number or send you an email address just via text. So making sure you're building in that resilience of them not just saying, oh, well, I know how to find it on a keyboard, you know, a physical keyboard, but I can't really find it on my phone keyboard because there's that little button you have to press to make it to the second page for numbers or the third page for symbols. Think about if your classes are in person, hybrid, or virtual, how is that going to change what you're planning? And then again, considering the amount of time it's going to take. Angie mentioned how you could do just one small chunk of this as a trickle or a warm-up activity, or maybe even a transition activity. So think about how you could use different aspects of this. And they do recommend not going to more than 5 letters. And I liked the suggestion earlier, starting with what's in your username and your password and maybe your name, your personal name for identification. Those would probably be really great starting points. Maybe in a smaller class, you realize, oh, well, we don't have anyone with Q or X or Z. And it's not that you skip those, but they might not be the first things that you're attending to. So I'm going to give you the links to the curriculum and all of the resources. You can download them to a Dropbox if that's what you like to use, or you can download it to your computer, or you can just view it to kind of check it out and see if it's something you might be interested in. You can also view the presentation slides that have all the links within, and you should actually receive in about a week. Katie's going to have an additional link for you in your email. Final check-in with you. Do you have any questions about using this curriculum before you get started? You can put them in the chat or be brave and unmute either way.
I think you might have mentioned this earlier in the presentation, but did you say that some of these lessons can be used as a standalone, like an instructor could choose a particular topic, but it would make sense outside of the context of the whole curriculum?
Absolutely. Yeah, they do build nicely. But for example, this lesson on strong and weak passwords, I think you could take straight into an intermediate class and use as is as a standalone. That's a great question.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Sure. So let's keep the conversation going. In about a month, we'll have another webinar, and this one is going to be on how to integrate digital literacy skills development into daily lesson plans. So it's not just, oh, on Mondays we have computer lab for half an hour, but you're using intentional activities that will help develop digital literacy skills and digital resilience from the beginning of your class all the way through the end of your class. So don't forget to register for the webinar if you're interested in that. And that's Tuesday, October 17th at 3 o'clock. Katie, can you pop that into the chat for me, please?
I did.
Perfect. You're awesome. Thank you. Okay. And thank you for coming today. If you have any questions or suggestions or ideas, please send me a note. My name's Darlene, and you can see my email address here, eslteacherdarlene@gmail.com. I'm happy to stick around and